Hey guys, Bud Cat 7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, December 2nd, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, in this video, I'd like to cover this article from Ancient Origins by two authors that I really respect, and I really should have their book, Ages of the Giants, referring to the giants here in the Americas. And they've done extensive research. That's Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer. And I read articles from Ancient Origin by them before, but this is a recent one, and it covers some of the mound builder culture that was in Pennsylvania and why there's not a lot of reference to this or archaeological um, evidence of this around. There's good reason for that, and they cover that in this article. It's an important thing to note about it. And to me, it sort of represents a transitioning or perhaps the different style of mounds, because some of the mounds in Pennsylvania are similar to the ones to be found in, let's say, the Ohio Valley that were built by the Adena and, built with this engineered soil and often with like a clay dome base underneath it to, increase the integrity of the mound and make it long lasting and durable. And that's, part of the mound building culture was the knowledge of the sort of engineered soils needed to build these mounds so that they would be long lasting. They wouldn't just simply wash away with the rain, like simply piling dirt up in a big mound. So some of the mounds there are stone mounds. So it's interesting to me that these mounds were built with either completely of stone or with stone incorporated into the integrity of the mound structure. I guess almost like an experimentation on how to increase the integrity of these mounds by either incorporating stone structures within them and then building on top of that, or again, coming up with just completely engineered soil, which I think really came later. And again, almost like a transitional phase with the building of the mounds from these stone mounds into these earthen, what they would consider earthen mounds, but they really aren't earthen. They're with these engineered soils for building purposes, clay, etc., whatever medium was incorporated in there. But you can find these sort of things in the New England area as well. Here's a picture of a postcard that Jim Vieira dug up of one of these stone mounds that was found to be found in Maine. And you can see the interior of it looks to me like it was built like a square or rectangle. It's a dual chamber mound as well. And they used the flat stones to build almost like a cube, I think, first, and then added the sort of, irregular stone on top of it to create the mound. But this was something that could have been found in Maine. It doesn't exist. It's gone, according to Jim Vieira. Used it for road fill or whatever purposes, or to build their own walls, because just one of the things on his channel, some guy you commented in one of my videos that has to do with the debunking of the historical narrative of the stone walls of New England. So he wrote in the comments, well, who do you think built the walls? Aliens? Because, I gave some of the facts about the walls, and I was according to him, denying that the colonists and settlers built any of the walls, but I never deny that. In fact, I always say that the colonists and settlers did build some of their own walls, and there's some really fine examples of that still around. But these more primitive type stone walls are built in the, wilderness areas on top of mountains and through lakes for some reason, in ponds and stuff, you know, that are there through ponds. Why is it through a pond? The pond's been there for hundreds of years with a stone wall going through it. You just, building stone walls. Don't crack your fingers building stone walls, by the way, because your farming days are over, which probably was real easy to do. Get your fingers, crushed in there a little bit, and now you can't work on your farm. So why would you do it? But they did build some stone walls, but the majority of stone walls were built by this culture that we don't know anything about, what I call the stone wall culture up there in New England. Here we see some of it here in New Hampshire. You can see all these walls and remnants of walls. Don't seem to be complete, but they're just completely kooky and make no sense in a lot of areas the way that they're built. So, who are these people that were displaced by the Iroquois up there? Originally, supposedly, all the Algonquin were in these areas of New England, and the Algonquin are considered a more ancient native culture there. And to me, based on my last video when we covered the good giants in Algonquin mythology, that there probably was a similar dynamic going on as with the Adena and the Hopewell between the Algonquin and the giants. It seems to me, by all these tales of the good giants, that in some respects, this was like how the Iroquois were when they were the Hopewell, the Haudenosaunee, when they were Hopewell, way in the distant past. This was the relationship that the Algonquin people had with the giants as well that were in these areas, and probably going even further into the past. There was no separation between the Adena and the peoples who were here in the Northeast. It's just maybe different segments of these people, or a completely different tribe, or, but the Stonewall culture is definitely, it could be within the same time periods we're talking about if they're right. Of course, there's this new age, new world bias in there about everything's new, but we have to talk about these things because, where are these mound builder cultures coming from and these giant humanoids associated with them, and in which direction did it flow? Jimmy, the Paleo Mountain Man, and I almost think that, that the culture was there up in the Northeast and then disseminated out from there elsewhere into the Americas, and was part of the nascent mound builder cultures where they built these mounds out of stone. And these are the type that can be found in Pennsylvania here, according to this article here by Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer. So let me read it to you. We'll talk about it some more a little bit. And discuss what's going on here. And this really concerns, the Adena culture. And here you can see this is from the University of Hawaii. This is the best representation of how far it extended, and this is, Western Pennsylvania, Western New York. And all these dots on the map here. This is the best representation. If you refer to any others, like on Wikipedia, it's nothing like this. It seems so, sophomoric, to put it mildly, but it covered, a wide range here. Here's some other examples of how the Adena culture, but up into these areas of New York and the mountainous regions where all the stone walls just happen to be right in here. And like I said, I think, based on what we know about Algonquin legends about the giants and the Algonquin, it seems that almost the same, you can highly suspect that the same dynamic was going on in anywhere, including in Europe with the Bell Beaker people too. And it's there and not discussed at all. But, we heard hints of it in the legends of the giants in Europe. There, it almost sounds like the identical stories that you hear with, the Native American people. So, to me, it just represents this sort of northern culture in the northern hemisphere with the Adena and the Bell Beaker probably being all one culture, just on different sides of the Atlantic. And it's the story, it gets even deeper than that if you want to consider some other things. So let's just let's read the article, talk about what was to be found in Pennsylvania as far as mound building culture, as told by Jason Johnson. Titans under the earth, evidence for the tall ones in the mounds of Pennsylvania from August 2021. So they dedicated to the memory of John William Dillon, who kept the truth in dreams alive. I hope he was a good guy. Okay, during the early woodland period, 1200 BC, I guess, the Adena people constructed extensive burial mounds and earthworks throughout the Ohio Valley in Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Many of the skeletal remains found in these mounds by early antiquarians and 20th century archaeologists were of powerfully built individuals reaching between 6.5 foot and 8 feet in height, 198 centimeters to 244 centimeters. It is the record of these remains which has given rise to the subject of the ancient quote-unquote giants of the Ohio Valley. Okay, but extends apparently far beyond the Ohio Valley, judging by, these maps that we see here. So it says powerfully built individuals. Okay, so here's a honest assessment by whoever it was that were digging these things up, and they often referred to these skeletal remains as having sort of connective tissues, like all the tendons, etc., and where they were located on the bone showed that they were extremely powerful. Okay, but it seems today, though, in the 21st century, that any skeletal remains being dug up that are over a certain height, immediately they go to gigantic. So they don't even have to think about it. It's like they make a beeline right for that, and go with that thread. Because, the impossibility of there being existence of large humanoids in the past is that's verboten now. So let's continue with this article here. And you know what, folks, it was that, it was these giant humanoid type people that built all the ancient megalithic monuments of the past, including the pyramids. There's a lot to be said about it that sort of goes unsaid. Like, like people frequently comment, well, the shafts are so small and giants couldn't fit in there and weren't designed for this and that and whatever. Okay, so open your directory wherever it is online or whatever and look up a thing called contractors. Okay, you can find stonemasons probably in those contractors too. Okay, it's called hiring somebody to do the work for you. They're going to use their knowledge and techniques of building for you, but they're going to build it for you the way you like it and the way you want it. Okay, they're not necessarily going to use it or live there. Okay, but they're going to be hired to do the project. Okay, who am I calling? Okay, so I'm going to call these rather large guys. Okay, that seem to work with stone so well everywhere on this planet apparently, and I'm going to hire them if I got money and I got gold or anything that these guys want. Then I'm going to have something built for me by them for me to fit me and not necessarily them. But they're going to build it and not me. See, because I'm a just average size and it would take me forever. And, hundreds and thousands of people to do all the work and everything in such a short period of time, like the pyramid, for example. But if you have large stature, obviously you're going to be able to complete the work in a shorter amount of time. You can do more work and in a shorter period of time. You can do heavier work in a shorter period of time if you're of a certain size and strength, like that of an elephant, including the possibility that gravity may have been different in the past. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so here's where you talk about the destruction of evidence, and if you didn't know, and you're going to hear about it now, that's why not a lot of discussed about Pennsylvania. While doing research for a book on this subject over the last several years, the authors were struck by how little of the archaeology of some regions is freely accessible and available to the public. One of those areas is the state of Pennsylvania, where the Carnegie Museum destroyed countless burial mounds without filing comprehensive reports in the late 1800s and early 1900s. That's 20th century, folks. Many of the mounds wrecked by the Carnegie are only known to the public from old press reports, such as the following published in The Sun on December 8th, 1893. This mound, which was originally about 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Seacrest farm in South Huntington Township. The most interesting feature in the recent excavation was the mummified torso of the human body. Portions of the bones dug up and the bones in the legs, Professor Peterson declares, are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet in height. And if Professor Peterson was alive today, he would not be in his career for very long if he said any such thing. But, it's still okay back then to say things like that. Nobody's cutting anybody else's balls off that badly back then. Large skeletal remains. In order to add some clarity to the subjects of the mound builders and large skeletal remains from Pennsylvania, the authors reviewed a considerable amount of archaeological literature from the state and incorporated the information into several chapters of Ages of the Giants, a cultural history of the tall ones in prehistoric America. Perhaps the most famous instance of press reports describing a large skeleton from a Pennsylvania mound is a case from Union Township in Washington County, Pennsylvania. In 1932, archaeologist George Fisher excavated the mound after he was informed that amateurs were engaged in heavy looting at the site. This situation attracted hundreds of spectators, and Fisher's work became a subject of daily discussion by the local media. One discovery in particular was regularly reported at this time. One of the most interesting reports that will go into the archives is that of on the on the body of a giant 7 feet 5 inches tall. This titan was found on the fifth level of the clay mound, where the bodies were sandwiched between 11 layers of sandstone. The majority of the adults measured between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 3 inches in stature. In 1932. One of the skeletons of these mighty men is 7 feet 5 inches in length, and even the remains of the women and children show them to have been of tremendous stature. Heavy, primitive faces must have topped their mammoth bodies, Fisher says, for all the skulls are heavy boned, with massive jaws and strong teeth that could have ripped meat into shreds, or some vegetable material that's kind of hard to chew for us with little tiny teeth. But if you got big old molars like an elephant or something like that, you could chew up a whole bunch of stuff that a whole lot of other animals couldn't. Okay, like the Lovelock cave people. Not the carnivorous man-eaters and bison eaters or anything like that. The pussycat tool eaters, tool, Thule, an aquatic plant, which might have been very sinewy or something like that, and you need some big old molars to grind it all up. Okay, and hence these double rows of teeth and big old molars and front teeth almost looking like molars and stuff like that, because they're grinding up a lot of vegetable material, because that's what teeth like that are designed for. And here's this, probably seen this effigy pipe that was by the Adena or Hopewell culture. They overlap, which we all know, the Indiana researchers know now. There's no overlap. There's just two people, different peoples living simultaneously in the same culture, sharing the same tradition. Mystery of the Mounds. Over the last decade, these types of press reports have caused several researchers to seek out more information on the mound excavated by Fisher, but until now, it has remained largely a mystery. The authors found that the site is known in the archaeological literature as the Pollux Hill Stone Mound. There is some debate over the age and cultural affiliations of the mound. Archaeologist and Adena expert Don W. Dragu considers the Pollux Hill cairn to belong to an Adena stone mound sub-tradition. So he's saying that a cairn, probably a large cairn, which are found in these areas of Pennsylvania, down in Virginia, West Virginia. They're found all over the place, folks. It's just, indications of just other culture of the ancient past that has nothing to do with Native American peoples per se, other than that this dynamic of the large humanoids as being the upper class or royalty or, whatever, the ruling class, where this dynamic was going on everywhere on the planet with these large humanoids and regular old people. And how that came to be, who we can speculate even further another time. But in more modern times, archaeologists have reevaluated some of the mounds that Dragu included in this cultural taxon, and have suggested that they could actually date to the late woodland times, several hundred years after the age of the Adena. It's certainly possible. Or maybe it's the other way around and they're older. As I said, the use of stone in the mass seems almost like a, trial and error way of trying to reinforce the durability of these long-lasting properties of these mounds, where as later is seen with a design with these engineered soils and clay and everything else, it seems a little bit more well thought out, in my opinion, of that. Unless, it's like this, completely of stone with this sort of flat stone cube base and then a regular stone on top of it. Who knows how many of these things existed in the Northeast? We don't know. That's why they can't make any calls without having a full picture of the past. Did they bring any of this stuff up, or can they look or gain anything from looking at this picture here, or even refer to it? Or they don't want to? What's wrong with them? Just told what to think. That's all. One reason for the difficulty in finding professionally documented information on the Pollux Hill cairn is the fact that Fisher himself did not publish the official report. Instead, Donald Cadzow published the report in 1933, utilizing information taken directly from Fisher's field notes. According to Cadzow's document, Fisher unearthed an extended adult skeleton covered with packed mud and rocks in the northwestern portion of the mound, which is numbered Burial 39 in the field notes. Regarding this burial, Caswell report states, as the bones were in poor condition, it was impossible to obtain exact measurements. Their size, however, indicated a very large, heavy person, much larger than the other burials in the mound, and may have been the original burial mound, and later cultures 1,000 years later decided, yeah, we'll bury in there too, because it's a good place. But you don't know. Following the excavations, the bones, secondary burials. Following the excavations, the bones of over 40 skeletons from Pollux Hill were transported to the museum in Harrisburg and then to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. Oh no. On October 12, 1932, the Pittsburgh Press reported that Donald Cadzow himself was the person in charge of transporting the skeletons from Finleyville to the museum, noting one skeleton making the trip with Cadzow to the Capitol is a giant 7 feet 5 inches in height. The information in the article came from the interview with Cadzow, who took the opportunity to condemn the Carnegie Museum's handling of Pennsylvania's prehistory. Artifacts on record from the Pollux Hill cairn include 2 rolled copper tubular beads, bone hairpins, stemmed and tanged points, celts, 1 stone mortar, and perforated bare canine teeth. And here's some gorgets or gorgets ornaments. Adena culture gorget ornaments, always 2 holes at Grave Creek Mound Museum. Yeah, many of these things had 2 holes. It's sort of, bolo kind of thing going on, I believe, or something like that with these things. And with holes drilled through them, as you can see. Field notes from the important site. Large skeletal remains were also recovered from the McKees Rocks Mound, again another stone mound, which once overlooked the confluence of the Ohio River and Cartier's Creek at Stowe Township in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Frank Garodet excavated the McKees Rocks Mound on behalf of the Carnegie Museum in 1896. Unfortunately, several controversies led to Garodet's resignation from the Carnegie and permanent retreat from archaeology before a complete report was filed for the excavations. In Ages of the Giants, we utilized Garodet's field notes as well as the research of 5 different archaeologists who reviewed the field notes, artifacts, and bones from the mound to recreate the discoveries at this important site. Relevant sources for the information provided here, as well as much more info on the site, can be found in the book. The McKees Rocks Mound was 16 or 17 feet, 4.8 to 5.1 meter in height at the time of the excavation, and 85 feet, 26 meters in diameter. There were over 30 burials in the mound of extended, cremated, and bone-bundled human remains, many of which were found in stone schist tombs. The mound was built up in 3 construction phases, each of which took an unknown length of time to complete. These phases span from the time of the Adena to the end of the Middle Woodland period. The oldest or primary phase of the mound was a 3.5 foot high, 1 meter high tumulus made of river sand and clay, which covered the skeleton of an Adena female, 6 foot 2 inches, 188 centimeters in length. Artifacts with this burial include an adze, 4 deer or elk scapula awls, a copper sheath for an imitation bear canine, 357 columnella shell beads, 153 marginella shell beads, antler and bone flaking tools, and one slate reel-shaped gorget. Okay, so here's a sort of sketch of the mound. Starts with this, hole in the ground with the one skeleton in it, then the other skeletons, another mound, and added to the mound later on. So it's noteworthy to see how over time and the additions to these mounds is just a totally different building style and medium used, with clay, for example, and whatnot. So changing technology there, which seems universal to all these mounds everywhere. And we know from all the reports on the Giants that many more mounds were found in many other states, not particularly known for their burial mounds. Okay, there were mounds and Giants found in every single state. Okay, as you know from my series, my first series on the Giants, state by state. Okay. Burial 20 was a female in a sandstone schist tomb. Referring to this burial, Frank Gaudet's field notes mention the person could not have been less than 6 foot 6 inches high, 198 centimeters. The skull of this burial had been crushed down into the breastbones, and the bones of the feet were missing. According to the historian George Thornton Fleming, who carefully documented the excavations, the remains would have measured 7 feet in height, with the feet and neck intact. There were several other skeletons from McKee's rocks, which measured between 6 foot 2 inches and 6 foot 4 inches in length. Squawky Hill, curious burial mound. In northwestern Pennsylvania, many burial mounds have been attributed to a Hopewell-influenced tradition, which some archaeologists have referred to as the Squawky Hill culture. Squawky Hill mounds are also found in northeastern Ohio and upper Ohio Valley in West Virginia and New York State. These mounds date to the Middle Woodland period, usually between 100 and 500 AD. Squawky Hill sites in Pennsylvania include the Sugar Run, Corydon, Irvin, and Cornplanter mound groups. There's a bunch of mound groups there. At the Cornplanter Run site in Warren County, Edmund Carpenter investigated 2 surviving mounds in 1941. He found the mounds to contain circular stone vaults composed of stone slabs, also featured stone roofing. The tombs were all empty, but one still contained a blade, red ochre, and calcined bone. According to Carpenter's report, a local artifact collector named Dudley A. Martin had looted the tombs prior to his investigations. Fortunately, Martin himself had gone public with his findings in the January 27, 1937 issue of the Altoona Tribune. Dudley A. Martin, octogenarian and collector of Indian relics, says that he was present at the opening of some curious burial mounds on the Carplanter Indian Reservation in Warren County nearly 50 years ago. These barrows were walled up inside and had outlets to the air, so much so that on opening one mound, it was found to be full of rattlesnakes. In one mound was found the skeleton of a chief, 7 feet tall, wearing much barbaric adornment and jewelry. There are many similar accounts from burial mounds featuring traits similar to the corn planter mounds along the Pennsylvania and New York State border region. Just over the line in the Genesee Township, a mound about 14 feet in diameter, walled up by a stone cairn about 3 or 4 feet high. Some curious persons dug into the side of this mound and brought to light the skeleton of a man of gigantic size, also the bones of a dog, nearly all of the bones crumbling upon exposure to the air. With the bones were found numerous flint arrowheads and some stone ornaments, and about a pint of small shells, which also soon disintegrated upon exposure. In December 1886, W.H. Scoville of Andrews Settlement discovered a mound at Ellisburg. On exploring it were found parts of the skeleton of a man measuring between 7 and 8 feet. So taken from A History of the Counties there in Pennsylvania in 1860. This mound was opened by vandals about 25 years ago, and entire skeletons in a good state of preservation were tossed aside or carried off by schoolboys. Many of the remains were found near the surface, covered by broad flagstones, while others were found at considerable depth. Great quantities of arrowheads, discoidals, stone axes, and beads of various kinds were discovered with the bones. Some of the skeletons were of such large proportions as to indicate that the people who lived in the days when the mound was built were a race of giants. 1895 Pittsburgh Daily Post. Archaeological research conducted in recent years indicates that the cultural history of western Pennsylvania, including the Adena, Hopewell, and late woodland mounds, is in need of revision. Perhaps as these new investigations progress, more information on obscure and little known sites will become available. Okay, so that's the whole article for you, but what's very interesting to me is these stone mounds and the incorporation of stone, the building with stone. Again, the giants and stone building just go hand in hand. And any sort of building technique with stone or without stone, even these engineered soils and the knowledge of this, okay? And again, and reflected in Native people's stories about how they were taught all of these things, okay, including maybe even the Hopewell were taught these things, okay. But it's very interesting to me because, Pennsylvania and New York, Western New York, a sort of different technique in building altogether with this stone. And as we know about all these stone walls here in the northeastern part of North America, of all these different kind of stone constructions, walls, effigies, um, serpents, cairns, chambers. These are reflected in all these things here. And the stone walls are just so convoluted and don't make any sense whatsoever. It's like barely a square anywhere. You know, it's hard to gauge what was going on there completely when you have to be on the ground to even see any of this stuff. And when you do, whereas it doesn't make sense to just look at it and say, what are they doing with this? It seems totally purposeful. So, what were those purposes? And again, I always refer back to the ancient Indian trails like these, of importance to Michigan here. It just so happens that much of this stems from the Ohio Valley and all these trails and where they went to. Okay, they couldn't have been going into hostile territory in these prehistoric trails here. So the culture that was in the Northeast with these stone walls which in themselves show a high level of organization in what they were trying to accomplish with them. What it was exactly is not known, but to consider the amount of materials that had to flow in and out of these places both ways seems to be what it was all about. And then when you take it even further and look at some of these things like John Jensen with ancient canals, okay, here's some of these canals and earthworks and other things with, you can see here with John Jensen and some of these harbors like this one, these artificial harbors, okay, like this are right here around Long Island, okay, which seems to be where like this trail seems to be leading to here. It's incomplete because the Northeast was more developed and settled. And what they can gain about anything seems to be more towards the center of the country, where as the eastern coast is just so developed, it's hard to, anything to be preserved except in the more remote regions of New England, in the heavily mountain and forested regions there. Okay, and it's funny they show the Adena culture here, and they always show these people. They always show these people like with their shirts off, no shirts or anything like that. Like here, it's so ridiculous. Like this, they're always depicted like this with their flaps and their privates flapping around in the breeze. I guess you're gonna need a deerskin truss by the time you get old or whatever. Just barely dressed, living in these northern climates. These are the Hopewell or the Adena, or you want to call them in one and all. They should show large people with small people, but we're not up to that yet. Just slowly catching up little by little here. You know, they don't want to go all the way there, but it's funny how they always depict these people. Nobody's wearing a shirt, wearing these kind of grass skirts and stuff. Okay, so how we look at some real Native American people and how they were, what, let's see where all the bare chested Native Americans have in actual portraits of Native Americans. Let's see. Any bare chested Native American portraits here of anybody? Anybody bare chested in any of these portraits of these people? Where's all the bare chested Native Americans like these stupid depictions are here? They show the Adena culture and all kind of stuff. These folks, these people are dual personality. They know one thing and they sort of emulate this other thing. Okay, this is where you're all led astray, thinking that how these people were. Were they like this, or were they more like this? Okay, no bare-chested native peoples anywhere. No bare-chested people anywhere. Okay, this is dopey, stupid, babyish. Okay. But anyway, guys, I thought you might want to hear about the mounds there, these stone mounds in Pennsylvania, and what they could possibly mean. Is this a transitional phase of the giants of the ancient past? Was it later on that the Hopewell showed up or the Algonquin showed up, and now we have this sort of dynamics going on between large ruling class and all these other subjects are, some other species of humanoid, such as us. Okay. Again, people, no matter what, how many Asian people and Siberian people you cross, You can't come up with Native American people there when that happens. There should be, otherwise, to be lots and lots of that on the other side of people identical to the Native Americans, but they're not. Okay, the Native Americans are unique in their own ways. All right, doesn't matter how many Siberians and Asian people you cross, they don't come out Native American. Okay, so where is this other form of humanoid a part of our species of all the native peoples here? Where are they coming from? Okay, there's a far different picture of the past, folks. Okay, and again, what was going on in the past? These ancient Indian trails, John Jensen's ancient canals here, in some of the canals in Louisiana. There, how that happened? Look at all these things, right? All not made by the oil companies, although it's hard to tell now. There's so many oil company canals, right? What were they doing here? Okay. What kind of mass exportation, importation kind of thing did they have going on? And who were they feeding? Okay. So many mentions of artificial waterways, etc., etc. Okay. So, in any case, guys, this is something to consider about the giants and these giant cultures and how building with stone again. The use of stone incorporated into construction. Stone mounds. Built people building with stone like this. Well, according to the native people, so who later on claimed they didn't do any of this stuff. That was from some previous people that were probably displaced and eliminated at the time of the giant genocides. So, anyway, guys, I thought you might like to hear about this article that Jason Giles on Foreign did about these mounds in Pennsylvania and how um, the Carnegie Museum just fouled everything up and destroyed all of this history that we can't see now because of some selfish people from these museums who are having some sort of mental fart or something like that and couldn't see preserving these. It's just like similar to the people who just dismantled this thing and threw it into the road works. You know, they just didn't care. And I'm sure none of the people think, yeah, get rid of that. Put a strip mall over there. Get rid of that old stupid Indian thing. You could see this thing was magnificent and they destroyed it. Okay. All right, guys. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little video here, and please do hit the like button and please do subscribe because we talk about very different things on the channel, and I think you might want to know about them. All right. Anyway, Bugcat 7 signing out. Peace.